All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Thursday, so you know what that means. Thursday wisdom, ladies and gentlemen, which is normally Wednesday wisdom every week, but this week we had a slight malfunction with the uploading process, but that's just fine because we are diving into some more of the Hermetica and the Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs, an introduction to the history of the Hermetica. And today is going to be a very fascinating one because we are on to the section titled The Wisdom of the Pharaohs. And that is the subtitle for the book here. The Wisdom of the Pharaohs. This one is a Tarsher Cornerstone edition written by Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy, breaking down the Hermetica. And this has been a great series, ladies and gentlemen, and I appreciate all of you interacting and watching and joining in the fun and learning the history, this such fascinating history, as we've gone through many different facets. Normally in this series, I've gone through and did a recap of kind of what we've learned so far with this history. But today, I'm just going to dive right into our section because we spent about 20 minutes in the beginning of last week's video recapping. So if you want to go back and get a recap on where we've gone through up to where we are now in the history of the Hermetica and the Hermetica and Islam and Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria, and how the Hermetica escapes to the Middle East. And then once again, it has to escape and it survives. It makes it to Florence, Italy, and Hermes and the reawakening of Europe, which began the Renaissance or the Renaissance, the rebirth, and then the unifying religion, this idea that, I forget the name of the gentleman, but this idea that there could be, let's see if I can find it here real quick, because this was fascinating. In Giordano Bruno, in Bruno's imagination, it was now poised to become the unifying religion in which Jews, all denominations of Christians, Platonic humanists, and even Muslims could meet and resolve their differences. Bruno's courage and conviction was nowhere more clearly demonstrated in his decision to return to Italy with this idea of a unifying religion or a unifying philosophy that comes from this Hermetic Egyptian religion of Hermes, which was the ancestor of the Greek mystery schools. And so it's just fascinating that this philosophy and this idea could link together. And that's what I've learned in my journeys and my studies, ladies and gentlemen, is, I was raised a Christian, and then you start to learn about these different philosophies and different theologies and ideologies from all around the world. And even just simply, if you watched Ancient Aliens back in the day, there was this concept. You'd start to realize that throughout all of these wisdom traditions or religions or philosophies or theologies across the world, there was correlations and there was connections between, even though there was different names for gods and characters, there was connections across all the religions, across all the planets, across all the planet, that kind of shared a similar kind of spiritual philosophy. And that's when you start to discover that there's a difference between spirituality and religion. And so, without me rambling on a whole lot more, ladies and gentlemen, our last section ended with this. I'll just kind of read the last bit here. Even if all of Casaubon's criticisms were correct, this guy who was criticizing the validity of the Hermetica, and so last week was defending the Hermetica from people who, the ultra-Orthodox James I, who was on the throne of England at the time, and he employed this guy and others to purge the magically inclined court of Elizabeth. I'm reading this from the book. So Hermeticists like John Dee and many others were ostracized. And so this was the last bit that we went through last time. And it's saying here, even if all of Casaubon's criticisms were correct, this guy that was employed by James to squash out and get rid of and purge this Hermetic influence in the court that was in the court of Queen Elizabeth. Even if all of his criticisms were correct, this would neither diminish the Hermetica's wisdom nor alter the fact that it had profoundly influenced some of the greatest minds and the greatest times in history, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we're fascinated with the Hermetica and the wisdom it has to offer, is because it has had a very large impact on not only people, but society and culture throughout history. And wherever this wisdom and knowledge goes and is allowed to flourish and is allowed to be studied and compared, there is great times in society. There's a flourishing of society, as you can see around the city of Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria, all the way to Florence, Italy, and the founding of the Renaissance, or the beginning of the Renaissance. It is one of the great sacred texts of the world, and it is worthy of respect and study for these reasons alone, ladies and gentlemen. So, we get to the section titled The Wisdom of the Pharaohs. And like I said earlier, that is the subtitle of the book, so I'm very fascinated to see now where this goes. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive right into it. The Wisdom of the Pharaohs. Once again, reading this from a book authored by Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy for purposes of teaching and commentary and extrapolation and fun, ladies and gentlemen. This is fun, so I hope you get some fun out of this too. So it begins by saying, quote, when Casaubon was writing, very little was actually known about ancient Egypt. So this guy that we just mentioned, who was employed by James I, King James I, this guy Casaubon, trying to find his first name here. Blah, blah, blah. Casaubon. Anyways, we don't even need his first name. So this guy that was employed to purge out this Hermetic influence in the court, when he was writing all of this, this hatchet job that can unjustify the reputation of the Hermetica, very little was actually even known then about ancient Egypt. So even more of a reason for him to be missing the mark, so to speak. We'll just put it like that. The hieroglyphics themselves, the book continues, were not translated until 2 centuries after his death. So the hieroglyphics, I'm just going to paraphrase a lot of this while I read through it. The hieroglyphics weren't even translated until 200 years after this guy was trying to claim that the Hermetica was just a mixture of the philosophy. This is his thought. He goes, their philosophy was nothing more than an exotic blend of Greek, Christian, and Jewish philosophy mixed up with astrology and magic. And he goes, the Egyptian names that pepper the text and the hieroglyphs were mere decoration and ornament. Well, 200 years later, we found out he was an idiot, or maybe missing the mark a little bit, or maybe he was employed. It's so funny. He was motivated, it says here, by a hidden political agenda. So we know enough about that. So these hieroglyphs themselves that weren't translated until 200 years after Casaubon, consequently, many modern scholars, the book continues, now believe that he was wrong to see the Hermetic philosophy as a 2nd century invention. So see, ladies and gentlemen, he was wrong. And I knew it. Especially since the discovery of the pyramid texts of Saqqara at the end of the last century. These hieroglyphs are over 5,000 years old and yet contain doctrines that are identical to those expounded in the Hermetica, ladies and gentlemen. That's just a fascinating point there, because I'm always relating this wisdom and the other wisdom traditions of the mystery schools to a time before ancient Egypt, a time before the Sumerians and Sumeria, a time of the previous golden age, a time of the previous cycle. And, like Atlantis, I always just throw Atlantis in as the explanation for the previous time of the golden age before the fall. And so these pyramid texts and these hieroglyphs being over 5,000 years old makes that very fascinating, ladies and gentlemen, because I think it could have come from this previous golden age. Atlantis itself, or the empire that was a part of Atlantis, the old world, ladies and gentlemen. So these hieroglyphs are over 5,000 years old and contain doctrines that are identical to those expounded upon in the Hermetica. So the Hermetica could be a piece of the ancient wisdom from Atlantis, or from the golden age and the old world. This suggests, the book continues, that the Hermetica may indeed contain the wisdom of the Pharaohs, which scholars in 2nd century Alexandria reworked for a contemporary readership. Fascinating. It continues saying, the Hermetica contains passages reminiscent of Jewish, Christian, and Greek works, and Casaubon saw this as proof that the Hermetica is a forgery. But as we just found out, consequently, many scholars now believe that he was wrong to see this as an invention and a forgery, created from a hodgepodge of these other philosophies. Alexandria was such, it says eclectic. Okay, it was such an eclectic environment that this is plausible. The ancients themselves believed, however, that these traditions were influenced by the Egyptian philosophy contained within the Hermetica. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is this philosophy contained within the Hermetica? Well, ladies and gentlemen, don't worry. We will get to that later in this series. And so, hopefully you're beginning to see the importance and recognize the importance of this philosophy and of this wisdom tradition that goes back at least 5,000 years, if not further. The wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen. So, Jews lived for many years in exile in Egypt, and their greatest prophet Moses was brought up as an Egyptian. So that's an interesting point there as well to double down on. Jews lived for many years in exile and persecution, I'll add, in Egypt, as we hear in all these stories of these times. And yet at the same time, very oddly enough, their greatest prophet Moses was brought up as an Egyptian himself. I believe raised by one of the priests in the Egyptian courts. And so many early Christians, the book continues, lived in Egypt. And the Greeks were in awe of the Egyptians, compared to whom they felt like children. Oh, is this the great story? Maybe. We'll see. Compared to whom they felt like children. See, I've heard this story before where, let's just read this. This is probably it. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus writes this, quote, the Egyptians are religious to excess, beyond any other nation in the world. And see, I think, I'm going to cut in there. Sorry, Herodotus. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but I think that sentence is important because remember what we said earlier, the difference when you discover that there's correlations between all of these theologies and philosophies that lead to a spiritual or a mystical understanding of the nature of reality and of the nature of God and, our existence and all of those things. And so there was a difference when you understand that there's a difference between religion and spirituality and spiritual knowledge. And so when Herodotus writes, the Egyptians are religious to excess beyond any other nation in the world, what pops into my mind, what comes from the ether is, or the Akasha, is like switching the word religious for spiritual or, mystical. The Egyptians are spiritual and mystical to excess beyond any other nation in the world. So in my mind, it's like they have a knowledge that far exceeds, like it said in the previous verse or previous few lines. Many early Christians, the Greeks were in awe of these Egyptians because compared to whom they felt like children. So back to what Herodotus writes here. The Egyptians are religious to excess, maybe spiritual, maybe mystical, beyond any other nation in the world. They are meticulous in everything which concerns their religion. And so remember that word religion. And every time you hear it, think or spiritual or mystical. And so they were meticulous in everything which concerns their spirituality, their mysticism, their religion. It was only, if I may put it so, Herodotus says, the day before yesterday that the Greeks came to know the origin and form of the various gods. Wow. If I may put it so, it was only if the day before yesterday, so he's kind of, I'm thinking he's joking around there a little, saying it was, compared to them, it's just been but one day, but, a few years. Anyways, the names of all the gods came to Greece from Egypt. For the names of all the gods have been known in Egypt from the beginning of time. From the beginning of time, ladies and gentlemen, that was Herodotus. So I'll read that one more time without interrupting. Herodotus writes, the Egyptians are religious to excess beyond any other nation in the world. They are meticulous in everything which concerns their religion. It was only, if I may put it so, a day before yesterday that the Greeks came to know the origin and form of the various gods. The names of all the gods came to Greece from Egypt. For the names of all the gods have been known in Egypt from the beginning of time. Back to the Golden Age, ladies and gentlemen, back to Atlantis. And if you're wondering what I'm referencing when I keep saying the Golden Age, let's show you real quick here. All right, so there's a great author and a great man, just such great interviews on the Leak Project, or did in the past. It's been a long time since he has, but it really awakens the mind about these long cycles that we're talking about. But Sheldon Moore wrote a book called Remember Zen, Awaken the Buddha Nature Within. And so it's very fascinating, but he talked about in the interview I listened, which was like a 4-hour interview, and every minute of it was fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. But he talked about this guy by the name of Sri Yukteswar. And let's go ahead and share the screen right here so you can see just an idea. Here we go. So see this here. This is the Yuga cycle calendar. And so we have the Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And as you can see, these are the ages, 24,000 years, life cycles of Earth. So if you think about a clock, 24 hours, we have that represented here, 12 on each side. It's interesting to note, though, that see here on the top, going from Taurus, Aries, Pisces, that might be upside down. I've heard that before, that Scorpio, Libra, Virgo, Leo is actually on the top in the Golden Age, because we are currently right now going into Aquarius here from Pisces. And we are thought to have come out of the Dark Ages not too long ago. So see 2014 AD down here. So the zodiac signs here would be flipped upside down. But anyways, you're seeing here this huge area, 4,800 years on each side. So 11,500 years of a golden age, or the truth age. And then the silver age is a little smaller. So it's great to see that the golden age is so big. And then the Treta Yuga, which is, they call it the mental age or the silver age, is in the middle there going down. Dwapara Yuga, they call it the electrical age. Very fascinating. That's the bronze. And the dark age down here, the Kali Yuga, which is only 2,400 years on each side compared to 11,000 years in the golden age. So the dark age doesn't last that long, but this is ascending day, descending night. So that is an example for you there, and you can do more research on your own and check that out. But that is an understanding of the ages and the cycles. And so each of these ages, like the age of Taurus, 2,000 years, the age of Aries, 2,000 years. And so you can see you have 6 of these zodiac signs on each side. That, I mean, it's just incredible, all the correlations of the, the numbers, the 6 and 6 and 12, and then 12 and 12 and 24. And it is just fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. So, without rambling on too much more about that, I just wanted to give you an idea of these cycles and how this knowledge could have been at a very high level at some time in the past, many, many thousands of years ago. Like this was saying just a second ago, the hieroglyphs are over 5,000 years old and yet contain the doctrines that are within the wisdom that is expounded in the Hermetica. And so, Herodotus even saying, for the names of all the gods have been known in Egypt from the beginning of time. And so it's just incredible, ladies and gentlemen. What is the beginning of time? I mean, there's this one, the Great Year. See, that shows better the Gold Age, Silver Age, Bronze, Iron Age, or the Dark Age. But so the Great Year, and what is the beginning of time if we're doing these cycles? And so it's interesting to keep those things in mind, because this is all related, and this will help us understand more along this journey. Now, let's continue back with what the book says here and finish up this little section. We'll make this one short and sweet today, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't have 59 minutes to sit here with me. I do love hour-long videos, but not everybody does. So if you're getting value, smash the like button, consider subscribing. If you've already subscribed, then leave me a comment and let me know what you think about this, because I love to hear from you and I love to get back to you in the comments section. Now, Casaubon, continuing with what the book says here, quote, Casaubon particularly claims that the Hermetica plagiarized the Timaeus, a work written by the Greek philosopher Plato in the 5th century BCE. And so, like the Hermetica, it includes the doctrines of astrology and reincarnation, which is part of the philosophy of the Hermetica. So if you were asking that question earlier, what is this wisdom? What is this philosophy? Well, some of it is the knowledge of astrology and reincarnation. Yet, the book continues, these ideas played no part in early Greek religion. So where did they come from? That's an interesting question. I'm glad he put it that way. So Casaubon is claiming, and remember, Platonic and Hermetic philosophies are side by side, because if we think back to the beginning of the Renaissance here in northern Italy, in Florence, in 1438, Gimesto Plethon made available to the awestruck Florentines the entire lost works of Plato. And so they founded and established, the philanthropist and scholar Cosimo de' Medici established the new Platonic Academy before, 40 years later, they sent out emissaries and discovered the lost works of thrice great Hermes. So there, once again, is a connection and a working together of the Platonic and Hermetic philosophies and wisdom traditions. And so this guy Casaubon is being an idiot again, particularly claims that the Hermetica is plagiarized from the Timaeus, a work written by Plato. And so did he not know that, in Florence, the Platonic Academy was working side by side with, it was the same thing. They were translating together and they were working on these old wisdom traditions side by side because they knew there was a connection. And so, like the Hermetica, it includes the doctrines of astrology and reincarnation. Yet these ideas played no part in early Greek religion. So where did they come from? Still, that's a great question. The answer is, of course, ancient Egypt. That's what the book says here. Over 100 years before Plato, the Greek sage Pythagoras. See, this is an important point here about Pythagoras and Plato and Pythagorean philosophy, Pythagorean doctrines. I'll just continue here. So over 100 years before Plato, the Greek sage Pythagoras had set out on a journey to acquire the knowledge of the world. This guy is awesome. Continuing, this led him to Egypt, where he spent 22 years in the temples being initiated into the religion of the Egyptians. Well, ladies and gentlemen, are you initiated into religions? Or are you initiated into mystery schools? That's a good question, because I think he was initiated into far more than just the religion of the Egyptians. Remember, initiation is an interesting word that has to do with a certain thing. According to the ancient Greek scholar Diogenes Laertius, forgive my pronunciation on that, Diogenes Laertius. I love to try to get him right. Anyways, Plato purchased 3 books of Pythagorean doctrines based on Egyptian wisdom, and these he adapted into the Timaeus. I need to get the Timaeus, apparently, even if that's how that's pronounced. But this section, just this little bit here, was so powerful to me when I first read it. It just, like, my mind was like, whoosh, wow, and then links started happening and connections, and it was like, do you ever get that, ladies and gentlemen, where you're thinking about these deep topics and you're like, wait a minute, that's that, and this is connected to that. And so this is amazing. So we're learning that this Hermetic wisdom, which was also connected to the Platonic philosophy, and now we just learned that Plato purchased 3 books of Pythagorean doctrines based on the Egyptian wisdom. So think of this, ladies and gentlemen. This is where my mind's going. Atlantis, or the Golden Age, and the great global empire of just a great time where all this knowledge is the highest level of consciousness and knowledge and whatever you can imagine about the Golden Age in Atlantis. And then, the cycles end and the eras change, and we go from, whatever it be, Leo into, I click that again. We go from Leo into the rest of them. And so it's not loading up here. That's fine. But anyways, there we go. Okay. So imagine this. We're in the Golden Age, Scorpio, another 2,000 years, Libra, Virgo. And then we get to Leo. And that's like the end of the Golden Age, or, the falling of the Golden Age. So Atlantis falls, or a cataclysm, some kind of natural disaster or something happens. And it starts to set people back. And then we go further down the cycle, Cancer, Gemini, until we get to the age of Taurus, which was where a lot of the bull, worshiping of the bull symbolism was. And then later, the age of Aries, which was a lot of the ram. And each of these are also connected to a planet. So I forget, let's do that real quick. What planet, because we're learning together here, what planet is, it's hard to type and hold a book at the same time. What planet is connected to Taurus? I'm not seeing it there. To Taurus. Venus. Venus, ladies and gentlemen. And what god is Venus? Fascinating. See, that's another aha. So let's type that in. I'm thinking Ishtar, Inanna, Aphrodite. What god is Venus? Sumerian. See, this is research here, ladies and gentlemen. I should be sharing the screen with you. Iona, Nissa Iona. Yep, Iona. Ishtar. Iona. There we go. Beautiful. Yes, let's definitely share this with you. This is good stuff. See, this is why I like doing this. We're learning here together, ladies and gentlemen. So see this? Inanna. So there was a time when there was the age of Venus, so to speak. And so Taurus, the bull, Venus, Inanna. So very fascinating. Very fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. So we had the age of Taurus. Anyways, I'm rambling. I'm researching at the same time. Hopefully you're picking something up. But where I was going with all that rambling was, like Herodotus said here, the names of all the gods have been known in Egypt from the beginning of time. So what was the beginning of time? So if we go back through these ages, back to the Golden Age, I'm thinking this knowledge came from then, all the way through the ages to the age of Taurus, and then all the way to now, ladies and gentlemen. But it was fascinating here that it came from Atlantis, came to probably through Sumeria to Egypt, and then at some random time in history, which was supposed to happen, it's destiny, ladies and gentlemen, Pythagoras, this incredible Greek sage, sets out on a journey to acquire the knowledge of the world, the lost wisdom of the ages, which is what we're researching here on Wednesday and Thursday today, but normally Wednesdays on this channel. Wednesday Wisdom, the wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen. And so he sets out on this journey to find the knowledge of the world, and he spends 22 years. You can only imagine. Imagine spending 22 years studying and practicing and, coming to know the wisdom that Herodotus described, that these Egyptians were spiritual and mystical and religious to excess beyond any other nation in the world, and meticulous in every way about this as well. And so Pythagoras spent 22 years with these guys in the temples, being initiated into this knowledge. And so then later, Plato purchases these 3 books of Pythagorean doctrines, and I'm sure he didn't just purchase them. I'm sure, there was groups of people learning and discussing and, theorizing on this wisdom that Pythagoras had learned before Plato, and Plato then gets the Pythagorean doctrines based on the Egyptian wisdom. This is fascinating for me. I hope you're really enjoying this, ladies and gentlemen, because this is powerful. And then these he adapted into the Timaeus. And so the similarities between the works of Plato and the Hermetica are not surprising. Therefore, since many of Plato's ideas were direct descendants of ancient Egyptian philosophy. Boom, ladies and gentlemen. That is a boom to wisdom, a boom to the ancient wisdom of the Pharaohs, lost wisdom of the Pharaohs. But that is incredible, that little bit there about how Pythagoras traveled from Greece to Egypt, spends 22 years there learning this knowledge. And so then Plato adapts that knowledge. And so we can see why. So it's like the Hermetica, the Timaeus, the Platonic philosophy also included doctrines of astrology and reincarnation, yet these ideas played no part in early Greek religion. So the great question was, where did they come from? And we just got our answer, ladies and gentlemen. They came from the same place that the Hermetica did itself. Luckily, the Greek sage Pythagoras was lucky enough himself to be welcomed and initiated to spend 22 years in the temples among the ancient Egyptian sages and masters themselves. And so the Platonic philosophy and the Hermetica are not surprisingly related, because many of Plato's ideas were direct descendants of the Egyptian philosophy, the ancient Egyptian philosophy, which is what the Hermetica is as well. Boom, ladies and gentlemen, that was a great little section. I love that bit. Thought I'd do a little more share screen there for you for purposes of, expanding and teaching and commenting on, because a lot of this is very fascinating. A lot of it is very fascinating to me, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope it is fascinating for you, because to look at what gods and what planets, and deities and things are connected to constellations and star systems, and the type of worship that was going on at a time. There was a video I listened to the other day that was talking about there was a time of the moon worship and Saturn worship, sun worship, Venus worship, and it was each of these ages. Makes me wonder if Gemini was the moon, wonder which one is the moon. But anyways, that is fascinating, ladies and gentlemen, because it gives us an insight and an understanding into the lost wisdom of the ages, the lost wisdom of Atlantis, maybe. But I love you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. Remember to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness. That's what enlightenment means to me. A greater understanding of our reality, the mysteries of our reality, and the hidden wisdom of the ages. Seek to discover that for yourself, and you will find an ability unknown before. And also remember, ladies and gentlemen, there is no way to happiness, because happiness is the way. And so if we can begin to bring happiness to life as, an activity, as something that we are working on, that we are bringing to the way, then all the things we've been telling ourselves in the future, oh, I'll be happy when I get there, but I can't be now, that becomes irrelevant, because we're already there. And then the entire journey is wonderful. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. If you got value, consider subscribing. Smash the like button. And if you're already subscribed, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about this, because I love to hear from you and I love to get back to you in the comments section. And I'll have to update my Etsy shop. I think I only got 3 listings that haven't expired yet, but they're still good ones, ladies and gentlemen. So check out my landscape paintings in the description box below the video, and as well as a link to the book itself, if you want to get that for yourself, to put it on your shelf so you can read along with me and study along and ponder on these little sections that we're going through, because there is a lot to think about. It's very, very deep. And so, as well as a link to C60 Purple Power, the most powerful antioxidant known to man, discovered by Buckminster Fuller, called it Buckminster Fullerene. And so give yourself the gift of health, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody needs that. And I'll leave it there. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Until next Tuesday, on Tuesday, Dow, if we can get the recording right this time. It's so funny. Can't believe I did that. I recorded the whole video and then uploaded. I did all the title and everything correct, but uploaded the wrong video for that. And then I deleted the one I recorded and then had to do a new one yesterday. And so that's why we're here today. But it's all fun, ladies and gentlemen. There's no reason to get upset, because as we learn about in the Tao and remembering Zen and awakening the Buddha nature within, you should definitely get this for yourself. Sheldon Moore deserves it. He deserves it, ladies and gentlemen. Look, there's even a question. No, never mind. We'll get into that a different day. Think critically, it says. Thinking critically. Oh, it's talking about desires, the negative effects of desires, dropping appearances and attachments. Good stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Good stuff. All right, we'll leave it there. Be the change that you want to see in the world. I know that's what Rex says all the time, but it's a great saying. And it's important to think about. It's like, be the mirror. If you can be the example, it's like, how do we make great change in the world? Well, it begins with an individual, and it begins within the individual. And so we need to be the example. So when you go out in life, try to be that mirror image of not what other people are, but what they want to be like, or what they would want to see in the world. Be the change that you want to see. All right, we'll leave it there. Boom to wisdom. No, 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 no.